Economic growth has been dismal globally. China is always one of the most important countries for growth statistics because it is often seen as the manufacturing hub for the world. If China is importing and exporting, it means the global economy is moving. But upon looking at their statistics, it seems that something is truly fishy. So what's really going on? You came here for the truth, so let me unveil that for you. I have seen many reports over the years talking about China's GDP. It's always lower than what is officially reported. China isn't the only country that does this, of course. All countries are fudging the numbers. Just look at Europe and what they are allowed to include in their GDP statistics. It's truly unbelievable. Today we're going to look at China because this is one country that the whole world is relying on because the manufacturing base, because of its insatiable appetite for commodities. It's crazy. They are the biggest consumer of just about everything today. And I wanted to show you some details about what's happening there right now. Let's get into it. China's growth fell to its slowest pace in nearly 3 decades. We have to understand why it's 3 decades and why not more. It's simply because when they started collecting this data, it was actually 1992. So that tells us that it could have been the slowest even further, but this is when the record keeping began, and so that's when we have this data from. So it's the slowest in potentially a very long time. Now, if we look at the numbers, 6.2%, that is still higher than what you would get in most other advanced economies in the world. Now, seeing this information here, what does that tell you about what is occurring? Clearly, there is a slowdown that is taking place in China right now. Nobody's going to deny that. There has been an impact from the trade issues that we have seen. The global economic slowdown is taking place. A lot of people simply are unwilling to admit it still, even today, still right now, we are in the middle of 2019 and people are still thinking that growth is going higher and higher, but it's not the case. Look at what it takes, how much money you have to put into the system through the stimulus measures from the governments with the reserve requirement ratios decreasing several fold. You're looking at the fact that all of these central banks around the world are printing money. We're talking about this monetary stimulus taking place at a record level, and still you're only getting a small amount of output as a result. So the more they put in, it's not getting more on the way out, and that will continue to get more and more prevalent as we go on in time. So I got a chart here to show you that corresponds to this data, and you can see here, looking at the fact that the GDP constant price year over year, that's the red line, has been moving down for years. I mean, take a look at this. Since the resurgence after the financial crisis, it's been a roller coaster going right down to the bottom. Now, how low it will go, we don't know. What the actual data is, the actual real number, well, others have suggestions that it could be much lower, and I'm going to show you some data on that in just a second. China's retail sales have changed in one regard, and that is with automobiles. Now, we have seen this number getting lower and lower, and I was showing you this as it was declining considerably throughout this period. Now, what has happened here? There has been a big change. You can see that green line heading up sky high. One change did occur, and that was Chinese state-owned enterprises were purchasing excessive amounts of vehicles. Could that be a possibility as to why we're seeing the surge right now? It didn't happen to save the GDP number, but perhaps kept it afloat. This right here just shows you some more data on that. Going back in 2009, we saw the same exact thing. The same resurgence occurred, yet we got into the whole financial crisis afterwards. This is just comparing the same data along with the credit impulse, and that is now coming down a little further. We could see how important this type of data is for China, for the rest of the world as well. China, Russia, and other authoritarian countries inflate their official GDP numbers by anywhere from 15 to 30% in a given year, according to a new analysis of quarter century of satellite data. So they're taking this, they're looking at the images, and they're trying to see the expansion of these particular countries. And what we can see here is that according to this data, they have been fudging the numbers. But you know what? When you look at this through Europe, through the United States, You can't just point fingers at one individual country. This is a battle that's going on, and one country needs to stand up there and pretend everything is just fine even when it isn't. Look how terrible things were in 2008. We had these banks that were collapsing. The entire financial system was going into cardiac arrest, and you actually had these bankers coming out, these central bankers coming out, the supranational bankers coming out, telling you that everything is okay, we have it under control. That's how crazy this system is, that they're willing to boldly lie to your face because they know the majority of people, they don't know, they don't care, simply make sure that I can do my normal 9 to 5, watch television when I get home, and I'm doing just fine. Well, that's not really the way it works in reality. So this data here, we don't know what to believe, but of course, this just shows you that yes, in fact, there are statistics that show countries that do make things seem better than they are. China's GDP growth could be half of the reported number, says the US economist at a prominent Chinese university. Okay, so according to this one individual, they do some calculations, they figure out what it's supposed to be, and it might be half of the reported number. Now, it's interesting the way that it's calculated. It's done at a more regional level instead of on a national basis. You got a lot of people, you got a lot of different things going on in China that is very different from what you would see in other countries. So the way that they report this data can be manipulated in such a way. Some have suggested it's just simply a fake number that they made up. I don't know, but when you recalculate it, when you create new ways of trying to say what is the growth of this particular country, what is the economy worth at this given time, well then that number there comes up to a much lower one than what is being reported, even though we are at a level right now that is at the lowest it's ever been. The growth is the lowest it's ever been since recording that number. This is out of the South China Morning Post. There is an immutable rule in nature and economics. The bigger you are, the harder it is to grow. The dinosaurs tried and failed. There are verbal reports of Chinese academics calculating China's 2018 economic growth at as low as 1.5% rather than the official 6.5%. This was from previous year. Looking at it with 1.5%, it is just unbelievable because it's nowhere near what we had seen with their official numbers. Now, I don't know, is that correct, 1.5%? Well, according to these individuals, it is, or at least it's more accurate than what they're providing us. I simply can't tell. I don't know how they come up with all these calculations, but is it lower? It seems like it probably is. I was surprised to read this information at the bottom here. Any analyst anywhere who still believes that China has a 6% growth rate should be thoroughly ashamed of themselves. That's pretty interesting coming out of this publication, but I just wanted to bring that to you. Thought it was interesting. Out of the Financial Times, China's economy is about 12% smaller than official figures indicate, and its real growth has been overstated by about 2 percentage points annually in recent years. This is coming out of the Brookings Institute, yet another individual, institution, corporation that is looking at this data, that's trying to figure out what's happening. They're all coming together, pointed to basically the same thing, and that is there is a slowdown that is going on in China much more than the official reported numbers. To finish off the video, just wanted to touch on this article out of CNBC. Economists warned that China's growth could plummet to 2% in the next decade. So this would be very significant, and although it's not necessarily in a contraction, if it were to get to 2% officially, then we know we have a very big issue. There are a lot of headwinds going on right now with China, and you could see that taking place all around the world. In fact, this could be something that spans for decades, they say, with the US and China. Each one of them is trying to gain their own version of dominance in the global field. Right now, obviously, the fact is that China has really gained on the US in, let's say, in the last 20 years or so, but there's still some more to go. China is trying to form alliances with other partners like Russia and like many others who the US has shunned, and so they are creating a lot of friendships in places that are very important around the world. That's all for this video. If you found it informative, all you need to do to support me is click one button. When you do so, you are really helping this channel out, so I do appreciate that very much. If you want the financial education you were not taught in school, these two books have everything you need. If you want to know what's going on in the financial system, well then these two books have that breakdown, okay? You're going to know what you need to manage your own money, to be able to ask the right questions if you have a financial advisor. All you got to do is read these two very simple jargonless books, okay? None of that garbage in these two. Check it out at the link in the description. If you want the audiobook, that's available at themoneygps.com. Hang on a second, don't go anywhere. You need to watch this video. Have you seen it already? If not, definitely click on it and I will see you there.